Hi everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. I'm getting back in the action here. Been down with a freaking cold for the last couple days, and the couple days before that was home with the kids as they were going through the cold, so nothing like a little family sharing of germs. Totally tired of it. I hope this is it for a good while. So I got a nice little mess on the bench here again. We'll start off with Bryan's 028 Wood Boss here. So there's an earlier video of this thing bench running and appearing to be fine, but when I got it up into the woods last weekend, oh boy was it not fine. Starting to run and idle and do, the stuff that it was doing on the bench, but as the minute I first started making a cut, I knew something wasn't right. It had no power. I mean, it would rev up, but the minute you get it in the wood, it would just bog down and lose chain speed, like fast. Felt like a lean condition, but I could not get the carburetor to tune out. I still don't know what the problem is, but I know a whole lot of what isn't the problem. I finally broke down and bought a combo pressure and vacuum pump from Mighty Vac. Now, there are videos all over the web of how to pressure test these cases on these saws, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail there. Probably some of the better videos and demonstrations are the chainsaw guy. He's got some pretty good ones, and I'm sure his equipment is factory supplied by somebody like Stihl or Husqvarna, but this will work. This Mighty Vac has a selector switch here. You can go from pressure to vacuum. Now I've got this pumped up to about 7. Yeah, that took it to 7.5, maybe 8. Actually about 8. It's not leaking. Now, you got to block every entrance and exit to the crankcase to do this right. Tons of ways of doing that. I'm going to go the uber simple route, and I'm just using rubber behind whatever. So behind the muffler right now, blocking the port, got that sealed. Just screwed it back on. Same thing with right underneath the carburetor. Got a piece blocking that. I like that method just in theory because it's allowing me to also test the carburetor boot. If that had a split in it, or even the pulse hose going to the carburetor with everything installed like this, pumped up, if one of those was leaking, this would be bleeding down, and it's not. So with this simple test, we can eliminate the halves of the crankcase, the cylinder gasket, and both crankshaft seals. If this was moving, we'd get out our little spray gun of soapy water and start blasting those points that we know to leak and find out what the hell was going on. I thought I was going to find a leaky crank seal on the drive side, because when I started taking this apart to diagnose, this has been hot. I don't know what has happened over here, whether just some heavy cutting at some point or whatever. It's been hot. And usually when you find this much kind of grease and gunk under here, that can be an indication that there was a leaking crank seal. But with the oil pump right here, it could also just mean that this thing's a messy little bastard. I know these Stihls are known for developing a leak after a while. So, anyway, we're kind of back to the start in the sense I don't know what's wrong with it. But to me it felt like it was starving for fuel, that it was a carburation issue, and this is bearing that out. We've got ignition and we've got fuel. Obviously, as I reassemble it, I'm going to pay really close attention to the gap on the coil to the flywheel. This is a Bosch plug. I mean, it's gapped right. I mean, I haven't put a gauge on it, but just looking at it, I can see it's gapped right. But I'm going to take a close look at the spark on this and really make sure that it looks good. Yeah, and then tear into that carburetor. We've still got the factory fuel hose, which is good. I don't know what it is about Stihl's rubber formulation, but it does not seem to go bad nearly as easily as some of the other stuff. This fuel tank vent was already replaced when I got it. now I guess I need to make sure that that thing is actually operating. I can test that with this vacuum pump and see. It should pull air through but not allow air back out, so I'll test all that. Look at the filter and get into the carb and look at the screen in there, make sure it's not plugged with some filter debris. We've all seen that before. So anyway, still got some work cut out for me, but I'm going to get this all back together now that I've been able to eliminate a whole bunch of other stuff. Again, if you don't do much, and there's the release button right there. If you don't do much of this stuff, the $80 or whatever the hell this is, that's a little much to spend on just a hobby. But if you do a lot of saw work and you don't want to guess about crank seals and stuff, this appears to be a pretty good, not terribly expensive solution. Alright, well, as we know from the past, bench testing doesn't mean squat with this saw. Went through just about everything. The carburetor, I didn't have a speck of anything in it. Super clean. The only thing that I had any question on was the height of the fuel inlet lever. And I went ahead and raised it just a little bit and then assembled the carb with pressure on it. Didn't bleed off, so I definitely don't have it too high at this point. How much I actually moved it, hell, I don't know, somewhere around a 32nd of an inch, maybe slightly more, but that's about it. So I noticed the difference in the tuning. I looked up the factory spec, and supposedly the low side should only be a little over 1/4 of a turn open, which is about where I've got it right now. I think on the high we've got roughly 5/8 to 3/4. So we'll see. I'm going to put the bar and chain back on it, and we'll test it out the next time I go up the firewood hill, which is still going to be another couple of weeks. Other change, important change. This had, when I got it, had the kind of generic aftermarket fuel tank vent installed. And there was nowhere to route the damn thing. I mean, I could route it all the way underneath the throttle linkage and kind of over to here, but it was not, it was always touching something and always being moved by the throttle linkage, and I didn't like that. And when I looked up the manual, evidently Stihl used basically a screw. And that's all it was an Allen head, like a set screw, like on a pulley, down into a hose. So I mimicked that. I found a screw that I have in my stock that would fit the hose properly, and hold on, Lily, would fit the hose properly and would come out through the proper exit right here to draw fresh air to ventilate the tank. You couldn't do that with this, wherever the hell I just put it, with that aftermarket one, and have it fit anywhere in here. It wouldn't fit behind the filter without jamming this up. If you tried to bend it and route it underneath, again, it kept hitting all the linkage until you got way over here, and even then it was still, I'm not convinced it was doing what it was supposed to. So this screw appears to be working and ventilating. Again, I've got to run a tank through it up on the firewood hill to really test it out and make sure it's got some torque now, because that's what I was running into. It just had no torque. You could rev it up, and the minute you would touch the wood, it would just kind of fall flat. I mean, my Super 2 was cutting absolute circles around this thing, and that shouldn't be the case. So anyway, we'll get an update as soon as I have a chance to get it up the hill again.